Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. This is a podcast for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault, whether as a child or as an adult. Know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. My name is Mike Chapman. I'm a certified recovery life coach and also a survivor. Let's find hope and healing together. Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. I'm your host, Mike Chapman, and with me today is Louis Romano, and I'll get to him in a second and share with you his bio. And if you would like to join us live on future podcasts, you can learn how to do so at my website, polarlifeconsulting.com/live. And for those of you in our live audience, you can be as anonymous as you would like. We will only state your name if you specifically type it out along with your comment or question in our chat room. And again, our guest today is Louis Romano. He is a parent of a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and a best-selling author of 21 novels, including the titles Intercession and Besa, B-E-S-A, and I'm sure I'll have links to those in the show notes, and a crossover artist who has written true crime fiction, crime historic fiction, and one young adult book, which are very popular these days. So we're going to start like we do most episodes with 4 questions. Now it's time for 4 questions, that part of the podcast when we get to know our guest a bit better by asking a few questions. Let's go. So, Louis, what is your favorite food memory?
Oh man, my favorite food memory. Probably my father's uncle owned a restaurant in the Bronx, New York, and they had the best pizza that you could ever imagine. It was epic in the Bronx in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. It was a oven that was made heated by coal.
Wow.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite memory. You know, I'm Italian, so food is a big thing in our culture, but that
Right.
is my favorite food memory. Not my mother's lasagna, my mother's meatballs, which are all great, but this was simply I can't get the taste, and I've had pizza all over the world, all over Italy anyway.
Wow. So that restaurant's no longer there?
It closed in '74, and it was just called the Half Moon Restaurant. Anybody from the Bronx in those days would know it.
Wow. So
Yeah,
nothing holds a candle to it, I
nothing,
suppose.
nothing.
Wow. Yeah, I went once with my daughter's high school trip to New York City and
Yeah,
went to the Italian corner in Manhattan
yeah, yeah.
and tried some pizza place. Don't know what it was. It was good. It was
Yeah,
good for sure.
most New York City pizzerias are good, but this was epic.
Right. Wow. Wonderful. So, what is your favorite Christmas or holiday memory?
I guess when my first son was born, I have 3 sons. I think that was my favorite to have a new Romano in the world, and he's named after me. And that, I think, having the first child in my life was probably the best Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, very special for sure.
very special.
Yes. So, what is your favorite church or house of worship memory?
Well, being raised Catholic and going to Catholic school my whole life, there are a lot of churches that I admired. One in the neighborhood called Our Lady of Mount Carmel was an old Italian church. But I have to tell you, I've been all over Europe, and it's got to be St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It's
Wow.
just the most amazing place, and they have the Piazza there, and the popes are buried downstairs, and it's
Right.
massive. And that's a place that every time I'm in Rome, and I've been to Rome about 7 or 8 times, I make sure that I at least go in to see it. I'm not very religious, but I do like the architecture and the history of it.
Right. And there's a lot of
Oh my
both
God,
there for sure.
for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
Yes. So, what is your favorite scripture or any inspirational quote that has helped you on your spiritual journey, and what about it speaks to you?
Well, because I'm involved very much in this horrible world that we're in with the molestation of young men and women who were molested by clergy. I think that Matthew 18, Jesus says, "But who shall cause one of those little ones who believe in me to fall? It were better for him that a millstone were hung around his neck and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. And that is very telling for the people that have suffered from abuse, especially by clergy.
Right. I understand. In fact, I think that was the same verse Richard Winman gave, and I just posted that episode this morning. And yeah, he gave that same verse. Uh, yeah, that millstone.
Great minds think alike.
I know historically it wasn't a little tiny millstone. Those were
No,
huge, giant things like at the base of like a windmill or something like that, that they
no,
would
those
turn
days,
the wheat into
those
flour.
days
Yes,
the donkeys used to walk them around the mill, and
exactly.
that's how they made flour and stuff. Yeah, yeah,
So those were huge.
they were huge.
So
Right,
yeah, not the cement galoshes, but no, this would be something that, yeah,
right.
you'd go straight down for sure.
Cement galoshes work too.
Yes. Okay, so with that, I would love to learn more about your own journey with this. You can be as detailed as you would like.
Sure.
And,
Thank you.
and then I would like to hear more about your healing journey and then what you're doing today.
Well, I have a little different and special story to tell. I myself, going to Catholic school for 12 years, and two of my sons went to Catholic colleges and Catholic graduate school, but were not very Catholic. And I was not myself molested, but one of my sons was
Okay.
when he was 7 years old. I have fought this thing. I didn't find out about his situation when he was 7 or 8 until he was 18 and 19 and got into a severe drug problem and was setting fires, arson, and very bad problems. It cost me a lot of money to keep him out of jail. So when I was working with Road to Recovery with Bob Hotzen, I was counseling quite a few young men and women who were molested by clergy, and they thought that my story was worse than theirs because it was a child of mine. I don't know what's worse because I was never molested myself. I could tell you that my first response to finding this out when he was 10 or 12 years older was to kill the priest. And I'm not saying that lightly. I was going to kill this man, murder him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if it wasn't done by my hand, it would have been done by other people's hands who I know. I grew up in let's say I grew up in an environment where if you did that or did something heinous to a family, you were gone, you were done, you were dead. And went back and forth in my mind on how I was going to do this. You know, people say, well, I'm going to kill you as a threat. You pee on the rug, I'm going to kill you. I actually was planning to kill this guy.
Hmm.
And he was a big shot in the church, and of course he denied everything, and of course he got away with it. And I hired the best lawyer in the country, Mitchell Garabedian, and it didn't work because you're talking about two drug addict kids that he molested, and they became drug addict kids. They were just two little innocent 8-year-olds. And the more he fought and the more he denied it, the more I wanted him dead. I decided, and believe me, I knew the right people to take care of that in New York.
Right.
But I said to myself, listen, what is going to happen to my family when that occurs? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen when I have to face God, if there is a God? I've never hurt anybody in my life physically, and I wouldn't want to, but I really, really was considering this man being dead. I was planning it. I was relishing in it. So then I talked to a few friends, and I decided to write this book, Intercession.
Hmm.
Uh, and to tell you the truth, it was a catharsis for me because it kept my mind occupied. And it's a book about revenge against people who have harmed children, not only Catholic priests, but uh,
Right.
other lay people that have harmed kids. The protagonist has 12 crucifixes that he uses to kill these 12 people he decided to kill. Tell people who I've counseled in Road to Recovery that there could be some triggers in this book.
Hmm.
Some people who just couldn't get through it, and some who've read it 5 times, literally 5 times, because they loved it so much. Fast forward now, that book's about 8 years old, I guess, and it's still selling. It was an Amazon bestseller. Very interesting thing is we've just gotten a $10 million commitment from a financier to make this into a feature movie. So it's helped my writing career, but more importantly, Michael, it's helped me from doing something that would have changed my soul. But I really wanted to do it. I mean, I don't know if I could get that through. When
Hmm.
I still pass the church where the events happened in the town that I live in, and I have to just close my eyes as I pass the church, think the things I want to think. He's not there anymore, the son of a bitch. And these two kids were not the only people he molested. It's a trail of a
Right.
woman, another kid in Pennsylvania. He's a son of a bitch and a bastard. But in my mind's eye, I still feel that I'd like to be crossing there, passing the rectory, and it would be on fire. Not that I'm going to do anything to do that, because I'm
Right.
way past that. I'm way past that.
Right.
And it really screwed my family up. It screwed my son up. He's successful in business now. I can't mention his name, obviously, but we don't even talk anymore. And I don't see three of my grandchildren. A lot
Mm.
because of what affected him and his drug use and changing his personality. My other two sons are terrific. As a result, my other three grandchildren from my oldest son are not even baptized. We are just anti-Catholic church.
Mm.
And I was never anti-Catholic. This is the book Intercession. I made sure that I was not anti-Catholic in the book, although I'm accused of that. I'm
Right.
accused of calumny. I get emails even now, 10 years later, 8 years later, about how I'm accusing priests wrongly. And we all know that that's way out of line. It's not true. All the dioceses going out of business and filing
Right.
Chapter 11 and all the filings. And I was right with Bob Hotzen and Road to Recovery, boycotting churches and helping these young men and young women through this. I'm not qualified for that, Michael. I'm a businessman and a writer. So I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I'm just a regular street guy. And I talked one guy off the ledge twice. He
Wow.
was going to kill himself over what happened to him years and years later. He
Right.
was he was abused by three priests. They passed him back and forth to each other. We found out one, and we were able to get him fired from the position he was in at a Catholic university in Florida. And I did that. I did that.
Hmm.
And I'm very proud of that I did that.
Right.
And, so what have I done to heal myself was mind over matter. I had to control my emotions. I'm
Right.
Sicilian, I'm part Sicilian, and none of my Sicilian ancestors, to my knowledge, were in the mafia or anything like that.
Right.
But the town that we're from in Sicily, Lucky Luciano came from that town. So there is
Mm.
history, and
Right.
it's in my DNA. When I get angry about something personal, I can feel it.
Right.
It's just not an adrenaline rush and it goes away. It's an adrenaline rush that doesn't go away.
Right.
And that might be part of my DNA and part of my ancestry, where I want to get even and I want to get, I want to make.
Right. Yes. How you mentioned when you first heard the disclosure, your response, I wanted to kill him, which is so interesting that you say that because so many survivors, when they consider whether to disclose or not to disclose
Yeah,
to family members, especially parents, they're fearful of that particular specific response that, oh my gosh, they're going to want to kill him, or they will kill them, they will act out. So then my family member who I love is going to get arrested, put in jail, ruin their life.
exactly.
So, right. And so that, yeah, just considering that prevents people from wanting to disclose to family members for that very fear. And yeah, I would like to go back to that. How did that happen when it happened with your son? How soon after the occurrence did he actually disclose to you?
He never
When,
did. He
oh,
never
how
did.
did you find out?
That's a great question, Michael. He was getting ready to put him in jail for selling drugs and doing a whole
Putting
bunch
your
of stuff.
son in jail.
Yeah, in jail. And then he tried to burn down the school he went to in college, and it was horrible, horrible time for us. And it was my alma mater, which was even worse. And I was
Hmm.
about to be an adjunct professor in creative writing, and it shocked us. I got him a great lawyer and a great psychiatrist. I
Hmm.
flew him up to Boston. My attorneys got his deposition, a transcript about him, and
Hmm.
my lawyers didn't want to give it to me. And my
Hmm.
lawyers knew that I'm a little rough character, and I'm from a rough background.
Right.
They didn't want to tell me. My lawyer saw it my way, and I got a redacted copy.
Hmm.
And I read the redacted copy, and it was blacked out. And then finally, on one of the pages, they missed the fact that he had this abuse with this priest. So then I
Hmm.
went back to my lawyer. I said, all right, now I know, and I want you to fucking tell me. Because then I don't have an issue with this priest. I have an issue with you. You're not telling me the truth, and you're my lawyer. And I just paid
Hmm.
you $70,000. They came with it, and then I approached my son delicately. We went up to the psychiatrist up in Boston, and he told me of the stories. And I don't want to be graphic about it, but it wasn't as bad as I've heard so many other survivors have to go through. But still, when you're 8 years old, your
Right.
sexuality hasn't been formed yet.
Absolutely. So it started at age 8 with him, and then how long did it continue for him?
It didn't continue long because we had the foresight to take him out of that Catholic school, and he went to
But you
public.
didn't know why at that time.
We didn't know why. I didn't like this guy. I even had to play golf with this son of a bitch one time, not
Mm.
knowing that this stuff happened because he would have had the 9 iron around his neck. And the funny thing about it is when they introduced him to me, he stepped back, and I didn't trust him. I didn't like him. He stepped back because he knew what he was doing with the kids.
Mm.
So, long story longer, he was acting out as a prepubescent teenager, and then he was not behaving like my other sons behaved. Then, of course, he got into the drug world, and I thought I was a slick guy being from the South Bronx and knowing all this stuff. I didn't know shit because he did it right under my eyes in my nice home in New Jersey. And the other two boys were, I mean, I'm sure they dabbled in marijuana and dabbled in drinking, not too much. I never had any problems with them. But this guy got caught,
Right.
and they were about to give him 10 years in jail. And I had the judge recused because she was a dame of the Catholic Church. And then I brought out all the scandal about the priests, and of course they
Mm.
all thought I was crazy and I'm making it up and you're full of shit. And these kids are just drug addicts. And he was doing every drug in the world. I sent him down to Florida. I think it was $10,000 a month back then to rehab, and
Hmm.
he was there for quite a while, a year or so. And then he got into selling telephones, and he did a great job because he's a great salesman. He's a great personality, but intrinsically he's evil.
Right.
And I blame it on what happened to him at 7, 8 years old. That's what I blame it on. I mean, he just
Right.
couldn't. Maybe he's bad to the core. Maybe that's it.
Hmm.
But if I had to look for something, maybe it was my parenting because he was the youngest child. Uh, but the other two are successful businessmen with families. You always look to blame somebody, right? You want to point the finger. How did this
Right.
happen? It can't happen to me. It can't happen to my son. But it did. Then I had to man up and say, okay, I'm not going to do anything to put my family in any more jeopardy. So
Right.
boycotting in front of the church and in front of many churches got me to the point where I was able to start to heal from that vengeful wanting to kill a person. And intercession was my vehicle, if
Mm.
you will. For some reason, intercession is still going strong, and it's if it becomes a movie, it's be my great. I have a few books in script now, and movie script now, but intercession seems to be the one the studios want.
Right.
And we're having meetings all week. This week, they're looking for director and so forth. So that'll be like a cap on my writing, having that done to show the world that what I went through, what I felt
Right.
going through this tragedy. It's a family tragedy as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds like you don't have a strong relationship with that older son who was abused.
No, the
Do you
youngest
know
son.
anything more about, obviously, he discussed all that when he was
Right.
getting in trouble with the law and so forth. Do you know if he's gotten help? Has he looked
I,
for counseling
I,
therapy? Is he doing well now? Sounds like he's married with children and
he's got 3 kids. He's married. He's got a great business. I don't like the way he behaves. I don't like the way he behaves towards women. I'm not surprised where my other two guys are, gentlemen, and I don't like the way he behaves toward women. And that, I think, is a part and parcel to what he suffered as a young boy. He was confused. He talks about sex openly and in mixed company, very graphically, by the way. And I didn't raise my kids like that. My other two, they won't say the word anything in front of their kids or in front of me. This guy goes way out of the line. And his
hmm.
treatment toward women was a problem. He even in the deposition with the big attorney, he had said that he thought he might have been gay as a young man. But I think he was manipulating the
Hmm.
attorney. I do, because he was always with the hottest girls and the hottest girlfriends, but treated them very poorly.
Right.
I think as a result of what he went through.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I remember the prodigal son, because we haven't talked in about 3 or 4 years now, and I don't see my grandchildren as a result of this, I believe. But I always hope that the prodigal son can return. We can maybe work it out. But my other sons are adamantly opposed to fixing it. Was I embarrassed by it? No, I was not.
Right.
I
So
mean,
he doesn't have a relationship with his brothers
no,
either,
or his mother,
or his
who's my
mother.
wife.
Yeah.
One of this guy that I know who, let's say, was on the other side of the law, we went for lunch one day and we talked about business and other things. And he said, let's go for a walk talk. And in the mob world is you go and you walk so you can't be
Right.
eavesdropped on. And he
Yep.
said to me, Louis, I know what happened with your son. And I said, okay. He said, how far do you want me to take it? I could have told him I want him dead. But by that time, I was already writing the book and I was already getting that anger out in my craft. It was the
Hmm.
third book I wrote back then. I've written, like I said, 21, um, and they're all not the same. They're not about this. Although this book, Intercession, is one of a 7-book series about two policemen who were chasing serial killers because they're
Right.
chasing John Deegan, who's the serial killer, in this book, Intercession. And it got great reviews. And like I said, 8 years later, it's still selling.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Let's see. So you've kind of dealt with this by writing, obviously. Anything else help you get through this, dealing with what happened to your son and all the feelings you've had to deal with, like gone to therapy or other things to process those feelings that you're dealing with as a result of what happened?
I didn't go to therapy. I should have, in retrospect. I'm 74 years old now, and I don't think I need it, but that's the last thing I should say. I get a kick out of breaking the balls of the Catholic Church. I get a kick out of it, Michael. I mean,
Right.
any chance I get, any forum I can take to talk about how bad they did with these changing priests from thing to thing. And I make it very clear in the book that the homosexual priests are not pedophiles.
Right. Very
I make
true.
it very clear in that because I'm not anti-gay. I have some gay friends. I don't have a lot of gay friends, but I'm not opposed to their lifestyle. It's for them to decide.
Right.
But I make sure that any chance I get, anytime I could say something negative on a post on Facebook or on Instagram, I get my word in there, and
Right,
I talk about
absolutely.
how horrible.
Pedophilia is very different from homosexuality. That means you like people, adult people of your same gender, whereas pedophilia, you as an adult like children, usually a specific age group for whatever that preference is. Sometimes they have a gender preference, sometimes they do not. But that's very different from heterosexuality or homosexuality. Very, very different.
Absolutely. I make a clear delineation on that. When you talk about Catholic priests, it's not only priests in the Catholic Church, the nuns have had their
Yes,
play with, as you know.
absolutely.
In this book, the protagonist visits a convent in Dublin. I'll say no more. But I tried to be fair. I tried to be, a coach, a photographer, a rabbi. But it's predominantly Catholic priests who this guy is killing. And that was me going to do that. The protagonist is written and modeled after a friend of mine who was in the priesthood and left for that reason. But I do judge the Catholic Church as the evil force that perpetuates and still perpetuates pedophilia. I coined it the pedophile playground. The
Right.
Vatican is the pedophile playground. Now, as much as I love Rome and I love the Vatican and my heritage is there, they did not very, very good things. And in the past 50 years, they should be ashamed of themselves. And it's showing.
Right. Right. And they're very slow to respond to all the abuse allegations. And I've got friends, two close friends, battling it firsthand
Yeah,
from their own experiences and see their struggles and
yeah, it's hard.
having to testify.
Yeah.
Um, it's many say that that process of dealing with the institution is as bad, if not worse, than the actual abuse.
Well, no doubt about it. And it's worse than if his father or his uncle or his cousin or his brother molested him or
Right.
her, because the priest represents God.
Right. Absolutely.
So I've
That
had
whole spiritual aspect there,
exactly.
yeah, it's spiritual abuse as well, and that power differential. I mean, how much more powerful than a spokesperson of God, you know, to use that power and misuse that power for their own
Well, I go back to the
cravings.
19. I started elementary school in 1956. And I remember the priests coming into the rooms and taking the kids out. And it was
Right.
normally the kid that had a lot of kids in his family or the kid who was all alone. And they would take them to go say mass or some other bullshit. And to me, the nuns were complicit. The
Right.
other priests were complicit. They
Mm-hmm.
knew what the hell was going on.
Right.
And they did nothing. And they still do nothing. When was the last time you heard of a priest whistleblower against
Right.
a pedophile priest? You don't. You don't.
Yeah.
So it's been a struggle for me to deal with that. Any chance I get to say something bad about Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, I mean, I despise the man because I know what he's about and what he's done to protect pedophiles. And he could
Right.
actually be the next pope, believe it or not. They
Wow.
could vote him in, God forbid. But I think the church has seen its day anyway. But when you're a victim, when you're a survivor, and you're fighting this biggest institution in the world, you got to feel like you're not going to win.
Right. Right. So, any final thoughts for our listener out there, even for parents of survivors listening to this? And it's like, oh my gosh, this happened to my child. What would you say to them?
For parents of survivors, all you've got to do is love your child. I wish I loved my son more. I wish I showed him that affection
Mm.
more. He wouldn't allow it. I'm not the most demonstrative person in the world, nor is his mother. And I don't think we gave him the attention that he needed. I don't think we gave him the psychiatric treatment that he needed. Although it was available, I have a few bucks. I don't think we handled it right after the fact because we were in our own turmoil.
Right.
You know, my wife basically shut it down, and I would blame her for putting him in Catholic school. So she and I would have our fights over it. Of course, it's not her fault, but at that point in time, I was ready to blame anybody. So I would say to parents, love the child more than you hate the church, and embrace that person and listen to them and believe them. I've dealt with a lot of Spanish kids who were both Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, and when they went to their parents would smack them and say, don't ever talk about that. Your priest would never do that. Well, the priest just took me in the basement and did this to me, Mom.
Right.
Bang, boom. No, he didn't. You're lying.
Right.
That's Satan's work. No, you got to
And
listen to.
that's part of the grooming, that they will use their position
Of course.
to groom the gatekeepers, including parents, including the whole church body.
And that's all in intercession.
Mm.
If anybody is a survivor and they can't afford to buy the book, write to me and I'll send you the book. If
Wonderful.
unless you have the propensity to be triggered by it, then I would recommend not reading it.
Right.
I don't want to be the one who they say, well, this guy read this book. But I got to tell you something, Michael. There was a situation, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it's a little longer, where a priest was murdered by a crucifix in
Wow.
California.
Mm-hmm.
And the case sort of disappeared. But I thought maybe I hoped it, I don't know, but I thought it was like a copycat from my book. I was hoping that it was,
Mm-hmm.
frankly. But I tried to follow the case, but they hushed it up. But he actually killed the priest with the crucifix, just like my protagonist did in Intercession. But I don't recommend that. I'm not recommending any violence toward anybody. Work it out, man. Work it out.
Right.
And I'm available to talk to anybody. If they want to buy the book, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on my website, lewisromanoauthor.com, or call me or text me. I'm available. You can get me through a lot of channels. And if
Mm-hmm.
you can't afford it, I'll send you one as a gift.
Yeah, we'll put all that contact information in the show notes as well. Any final words?
No, Michael, I just thank you because you know something? This helps me get over it too.
Oh, definitely. Anytime you can share your story, it gets it out of your head,
Yeah,
and yeah, it gives you a little bit more freedom and a
yeah.
little bit more healing for sure.
Now I'm going to go have a cigar at my cigar lounge. I don't drink, and it's another thing I don't do. I
Yes,
really appreciate being on your show. You're a great man.
absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us. And with that, we'll see you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. If you would like to learn more about my coaching with Polar Live Consulting, where I provide one-on-one coaching and group coaching, both with a focus on healing for male survivors, reach out to me at polarliveconsulting.com. That is Polar spelled Polar. I would love to hear from you. I want to hear your story. If you would like your story featured on this podcast, contact me via my website. If you like this podcast, please rate and review because that's how other people can find me, and I really want to spread this message of healing and hope to others. And remember, you are not alone. Healing is possible, and the abuse was not your fault. Let me repeat that. The abuse was not your fault. See you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast.